Hi, digital writers. My name is Jessica Leica. I'm the creative producer for this year's Digital Writers Festival, and I am here with Bren Cartheders. He's a Melbourne-based writer and broadcaster, and he has founded the state. He's a founding station manager at the University of Melbourne, the Fodler, and you can tweet him at Bren Cartheders. Sorry, Bren, your last name's a bit confusing for me. Cartheders.
I can cover it.
Yeah. So why don't you introduce us to your panel, Bren?
So my name is Bren Carruthers.
Carruthers.
Sorry to embarrass you there, Jess. Thank you everyone for joining us here on what is one of the first of two events here for the News Digital Student Editor Conference, which is brought to you in collaboration with Express Media and the Digital Writers Festival, of course. So thank you so much for joining us. And this event is entitled Looking Back, Looking Forward. So we're joined by four former student editors, who I'll briefly introduce. Just to clarify, for a bit of background of who I am, I myself, I'm a former student editor at Lot's Wife, which is the publication at Monash University. As Jess alluded to, I'm also the founding station manager of the Fodder, which is at the University of Melbourne. We were launching on Tuesday, which is terrifying, but this panel is not about me, it's actually about our panelists, and I'll be doing my best Tony Jones impersonation and moderating today. You can join us in this conversation using the DWF 15 and News 2015 hashtags, and I think I will pass it along to our former student editors. So, seeing as we are already with Harriet and or Patty and Hannah, maybe we should start there. Maybe just introduce yourselves, tell us which publication you edited and what you studied and what you're doing at the moment.
Okay, cool. I may as well start. I'm Hattie O'Donnell. I edited Vertigo for UTS, University of Technology Sydney, last year. I'm in my final year of a communications law degree, and I just finished interning at Hachette Publishing House and Junkie. So yeah, that's pretty much me.
I'm Hannah Story. I also edited the UTS paper Vertigo, but I edited it in 2013. I then went on to edit the UTS Writers Anthology in 2014. I got a job at the Music Street Press and became the assistant editor, and I'm now their arts editor. And I also do a little bit of work with Lifted Brow as their deputy online editor.
Cool.
Yeah, that's us.
Max Chalmers.
Yeah, hey guys. So I edited On Histoire, which is the University of Sydney's student newspaper, in 2013. I think it's the last student paper in the country that has a weekly print run. So that was kind of my in on journalism. I was just an art student, but I got involved in that and then started interning at New Matilda towards the end of the year. And by the time I finished up at Oni, that had become sort of part-time work and eventually drifted into full-time work. So I'm now basically working as a journalist at New Matilda and doing all the little things you do when you work at a small publication, from social media to researching stories to looking up defamation law to whatever we had to do each and every day.
And finally, Sally White.
So I was one of the editors of Virago, which is the student magazine at Melbourne Uni, in 2013, one of four, and so we had a monthly magazine and a creative writing anthology, and then towards the end of 2013 I did a lot of freelance work, and then I finished uni halfway through last year, and right about the time that I finished uni, Crikey was like, hey, would you like a job? And I said, yes, please, very much so, and I've been a journalist at Crikey ever since then.
Very nice, very nice. So we are here to both discuss, reflect on your times as student editors, but also kind of think about moving into the industry, of course. But we will, in turn, actually get to that. So we'll look back first. This is why we're phrased it, looking back, looking forward. So I think it's actually interesting that both Hannah and Hattie have joined us on the same computer, Because you're obviously friends, and
Yes.
you're both part of the editorial team at Vertigo, but different years. So maybe it's best to start by asking you guys, how do you deal with contributors who are friends or peers?
Oh God.
Okay, that's an interesting question.
It's a
I think.
difficult question.
Yeah. Well, it's often quite difficult to find contributors, and if you do have classes with people that you know are sort of interested in certain topics or interested in writing or getting sort of published and that thing, you know, that thing that we all do. It's sort of, you often go to friends. Like we found a few people that were happy to keep contributing throughout the year. I think it was the same for you in 2013, but
in 2013 the first edition is always the hardest edition to put together because you don't have a team of contributors
exactly.
And so it's happening over summer, so no one is at uni, no one
cares,
no one is paying attention, and so it was a lot of like calling up our friends and being like, can you please write something? And sometimes those pieces didn't work. They weren't suitable for the publication, they weren't suitable for the audience, and you had to go back and say, look, this isn't working, but obviously you're still my mate. We spent a lot of time, I think, navigating that, and not necessarily, it wasn't easy, but I think you can establish boundaries between like your editorial life and how, when you guys hang out at the pub afterwards.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I think they understood that we were just doing it because we had to, not as some slight against them.
Yeah.
Max?
Yeah, for us it was maybe a bit easier because we had each editor, there were 10 of us, so each of us had a group of 7 people who we chose at the end of the year, and we had a sort of bartering system for who would get which reporters, and you'd trade with reporters and, you know, open reporter economy. But so I made sure that I just veered away from having my friends write for me because I'd hate to like their stuff, or worse, maybe put editors in it that they weren't happy with. So I think, yeah, but with obviously with student media, everyone's so close and it's such a small community that you're inevitably going to be dealing with your friends and stuff. And if you can get them to submit copy when you're a bit low, that's great. But I think the only person I really worked with who was a friend was someone I knew was so good that I'd never have to even look at her copy before I published it, let alone like spike it. So I grabbed her up as one of my reporters, and she was great. But it's always like, I think it'll probably come up in a lot of the stuff we're going to be talking about as this event goes on, that line between, you know, you're so close with the people who are around you, not just your friends, but also student politicians and other people in student media, that is a really awkward and personal sort of game you have to play when you're making publication decisions. And I think one that helps inform the way you think about journalism as you go on and do it in a bigger and more professional setting.
Sally?
Yeah, I guess we had like a group of about 30 sub-editors, and then we had contributors past that. And so we had quite a few friends in the sub-editing team, and then friends that would submit stuff as well. And depending on which area it was, like if a friend of mine submitted a news piece, then I'd probably be the one who'd be editing it and looking at it. And most of the time it wasn't an issue, but if we ever did think that we needed to, I guess, give someone some constructive criticism or something like that, we would sort of maybe hand it on to one of the other people in the editing team if it was for a friend, so that we could keep that distance and keep that sort of professional and personal a little bit separate. But we didn't have too many issues. I think the main issue was like if we had friends that were contributors actually finding something other than Farrago to talk about, because we would just call them shitless because they were like, you need to talk about something else.
So we've talked a lot about kind of getting content from friends, if you like, and with relative success, I think, for all concerned. But, I mean, there are other people on campus besides the people that you know and your friends. What kind of measures did you and your co-editors try to take to try and find the best content and the best contributors on campus during your tenure? We'll go to Max first, I think.
Yeah, so at ONI, again, we were quite lucky because the publication, I think, is quite well known on campus and has like a bit of a history and comes up, people sort of come to you. So we had at the beginning of the year, I think 150 reporter applications, which we whittled down to about 70 people on our sort of regular roster. So the bigger problem for us, and I'm sure for all student media, and it comes up in student elections all the time, is the diversity of contributors more than anything. So diversity in obvious ways like gender and ethnic background and all those kinds of things, but also for us, the faculty. So we have a million arts students and a million media students who are trying to get their first byline so they can, you know, put their kind of, take the first step on the rung. But you don't hear a lot from the less, I guess, humanities-based faculties, where there's often really, really interesting stuff going on campus and really scandalous stuff and great stories. But because there's not people there who are looking to write, they don't contribute as much. So we tried to reach out, and when we were running for election, we made all the standard promises everyone made. It's like, we'll go find those elusive engineering students, we'll wrestle them in the ground, we'll drink them under the table until they're bloody right for us. And you know, we'll go. We also have satellite campuses, which are, you know, often left out. They're not on main campus, so they kind of get forgotten. So we said we go out there and do that. And yeah, I mean, we had varying success. We were quite direct. We actually went out to one of the satellite campuses and we had kind of affirmative action for people when they're applying as reporters if they were from non-arts or humanities backgrounds, but I don't think we were that successful. I remember one of my reporters was a guy from one of the satellite campuses, which is mostly sports science, and I was like, this is great. He's going to write about what's happening there every week. We're going to bring it in. It's going to be relevant to those people on that campus. And every week he just published, just submitted an op-ed about like Kevin Rudd's leadership or like federal politics leadership turmoil. And I was like, I don't want to read about this from like the Herald, let alone from a student media. Like, you know, what's happening over on your campus? And it was always the same response, like a 700-word, op-ed on federal politics. But basically, we, I guess, just tried to go to the campuses and find the people and talk to them and get them involved with varying degrees of success.
Let's jump to Sally now, and I'm sorry that I kind of jumped strangely there, but I'll try not to do that again to confuse everyone.
So with us, we also had a big thing that we wanted to get a whole lot more people from like science and other backgrounds that weren't arts and media comm majors, and we actually physically went to science lectures. It's pretty scandalous, and like asked lecturers if we could stand up the front of their lecture theatres for 5 minutes at the start and say, hey, Virago isn't just for arts kids, please write for us. And we had a science section and tried to really like broadcast that we were getting a bit of a broader focus, and that helped. But it was a sort of thing that like even once you do that initial push, it involves so much more like continuing to say, hey, we still want you, we weren't just doing it for one edition, keep writing for us. And so it was a thing that it took a lot of like sustained effort over the year to try and get more people in, and you know, tried to make our parties and stuff more accessible as well, and say, oh, you know, it doesn't matter if you don't know anyone, come along, so that it wasn't so cliquey, because we were trying to not seem like we were just like a media and comm major club, basically.
Fair enough. Hannah and Hattie.
Okay, well, with our year last year, we had different sort of sections. We had like to go towards like the science to tech side. We tried to appeal to more students by including tech and gaming and a science one as well, which was great. But we'd often end up having people that we knew, again, who were science students, actually just writing that for us, because it's so hard to try and, like, we tried to tap into that, and but it was really difficult. Like, you try and follow up people, but they just weren't really interested. But I think, yeah, like, I mean, regarding getting more people on campus to sort of, like, raising the profile of Vertigo, for one thing, because, like, I mean, it is pretty comms media based, and sort of arts, not cliquey, but I mean, a lot of people don't read it outside of the arts faculty. But we did try and do that, and I think we were more successful. Like, we had more people picking it up in different faculties, which was really cool by the end of the year. So obviously, I guess those other sections started to sort of I don't know, people were interested in reading it, which is great. And getting more people to, I don't know, read it and contribute from the start of the year. We went to open days, and we'd have stalls, and we'd have parties, and we'd have that sort of thing. Like, we'd talk in lectures, same as you, Sally, and yeah. So that way, it's sort of, we got a larger contributor base, but it was hard initially.
I found a lot of it was about getting people comfortable with writing in an extracurricular sense.
Definitely.
A lot of people from other faculties weren't comfortable with the form. And so they had to be edited a fair amount, and then they weren't necessarily responding very well to those. It became quite difficult. We managed to get like an IT columnist in at the beginning, just talking about, not even about IT, we just wanted him to write. We had some science people, some business people, but we found that as things got busier for them and they went to do internships and they had exam periods and they had all of this stuff that as communications grads, most of us were writing grads, we never had to deal with. And so they struggled more with the deadlines and the actual writing of the pieces. In terms of diversity, it's difficult in the sense that the communications faculty just isn't very diverse. It's mainly women. It's 90% white women, I'm fairly sure. And so you had to kind of go out of your way to find
the diversity.
Some diversity there.
Okay.
We tried. Building.
I think that's the most important thing. It's about the trying. You want to give a voice to everyone, and this is something that comes up a lot in conversation with a lot of people that I talk about, particularly in regards to science content as well. Is that it's so difficult to get non-humanities people involved to actually talk and write. Just a reminder, if you're watching at home, you can pose questions to our panel via the DWF15 hashtag and the News 2015 hashtag, if that is something that you would like to do. Let's switch it up, switch up the conversation a little bit here, and talk about the actual internal kind of within the office aspect of the job. And I know that at Farrago there are normally 4 editors. I think during Max's tenure at Honey there were 12 editors or something, and 10. And Vertigo is normally about 10 or 12 as well.
We had 10.
Yeah, we had 10 as well.
So you're obviously working with a very diverse cast, and I mean this expands widely across many campuses. When I was an editor, I only had one other co-editor. But how do you manage to keep the peace in the office, if you like? Because it's a good place to go nuts. One of the main questions that was asked at the actual physical news conference was how you deal with conflict. So did you guys devise a way to help you with decision processes and kind of keeping out of each other's way when you're kind of intensely busy or something? Or let's start with you, Harriet and
okay, sure.
Hannah.
Yeah, well, with us, I think it was really good because we were actually all incredibly good friends by the end of it. Most of us didn't know each other at the start. There were a couple of us who knew each other, but that was sort of it. And then because we were all from really diverse faculties, like there's law kids, there's science kids, there was, I don't know, our design team as well. But we all ended up just getting along so well that we didn't really need it. But like when we did have disagreements or discussions about different things, like we would always be incredibly respectful and like know that there was that respect there and that sort of boundary and like safe space to be able to discuss ideas without sort of being judged and without that affecting our relationships outside of making the paper. Like that was definitely a really important thing that we devised. And we'd have weekly meetings, of course. And yeah, like I mean, it was all about talking to each other and being really honest and being respectful and knowing that that was a safe space to do so. So yeah.
A really cool thing about the 2014 team is that they all became really, really close, and so they'd have these parties, and they all just genuinely really liked each other, which I thought was really cool. Yeah. We also tried really hard to like if you can hang out together on a social level, it will help professionally, I think. in the same way that in the real world you go to after work drinks and you can socialize with each other. We did we had like courtesy rules on like this board about like how to be nice and like how to I don't know, talk to each other about problems.
Yeah.
A lot of it came down to having like a kind of like a person to kind of be the nag and just like acknowledge that they were the nag and to hassle people into doing stuff and to just try and like pull it all together, which is a weird role to take, but it's kind of necessary because people get swept up in their own stuff. Everybody, especially because most of us were media students, we were all interning. Like we all had these really difficult schedules to navigate around, so you'd take Tuesday afternoon and that was your time, and you would all be there together for it. By the end of our tenure, I got a full-time job, so I kind of like pulled back a lot, and that was like I stopped going to those meetings on time, but I got there, and we had to, like, I guess, like renegotiate those boundaries.
Max.
Yeah, so we had a really intense group in terms of the way we tried to approach organizational issues, and we were really ideological about it, and like we have to make sure everyone can like air grievances and have equal speaking time, and that we don't speak over each other. So we had eventually a system which was actually really good, and which I've tried to bring to other newsrooms I've worked in and not been able to convince anyone to use, but a grievance system where, because there are 10 of us at the start of each meeting, we'd go around one by one and all talk about something that had like annoyed us from the previous week. So, oh, X, your copy didn't come in, or you changed my page and you didn't tell me, or whatever. But then also try and say the positives, like, oh, that article we had was really good. I really liked the cover. I think everyone, X, Y, Z did this well. So we had a lot of formal process like that, and we would have like a speaking. I don't know, we had some toy we threw around the office, and that was like, you couldn't speak unless you had that. But I mean, it's hard because we did have really big disagreements, and because we were all really passionate about what we were doing and we all thought it mattered a lot, we had big arguments. And I think ultimately it was because we had some processes in place whereby we could actually discuss them openly and they didn't just simmer. We also were spending big hours in the office together in this crappy little underground office. But yeah, I think like what the girls said before, we also socialized a lot together, and that was really helpful. The other thing that's helpful is that when you are an editorial team who are pushing people a bit and trying to annoy some of the student polys a bit, you get attacked quite heavily, and that's quite a good bonding experience. Like, like we're all different people. I hate these guys way more, so we'll band together. But yeah, it's a fine line though, because you end up spending a lot of time with your other editors, and it becomes hard to talk about anything except what you're doing, and it puts your other friends offside a bit. But yeah, I think like basically speaking openly and having those processes was probably the smartest thing we did in that regard.
Well, they become your circle of friends.
Yeah,
like they become your kind of core group that you see all the time. And even just from like the moment where you learn, where you get elected, is where you first start to bond and hang out with each other so much. 2 weeks straight of just being on campus
and being hassled
and trying to navigate that. It was really intense, but also I think it was really important for us as a team to learn how to work together in that way.
Definitely. Yeah.
It's a bit different for us because we only had 4, so we had a lot, I guess, a smaller number of personalities and opinions to manage than the teams at Oni or at Vertigo. So we didn't have as many, I think, really formal meetings where we were like, okay, we're all going to be in the office at this time, because we pretty much lived in the office. But I know for me, I had to put a lot of because I can be quite bossy, so I put like a real personal responsibility on myself to make sure that I didn't that I was sort of maybe overly consultative, because I have a tendency to just ram through and be like, oh yeah, this is all these decisions I made and stuff that I did. And so we were fairly spent a lot of time going, hey, I did this, is this okay? Or asking before we commissioned anything, even though, news was an area that I worked in quite a bit, and my co-editor Meg was really the main push behind the creative section. And so even though we sort of had different sections that we led, we never really did anything without really consulting with each other, like not over anything like big, but we were pretty good at saying, oh, like, I wish you hadn't done that, or could you please do it now or by the end of the day, if something had, you know, not happened or happened not quite the way that we wanted. We were pretty good at sort of saying that, and then still, and knowing that that was a work thing and not like a, I asked you to do this, therefore I obviously hate your guts type thing. Like, we were able to keep that fairly separate, which was good.
That's an important point, actually, because you, as a group of four, did separate things very much into kind of separate roles, if you like. Did the others, did Max and the girls from Vertigo, did you guys have a similar kind of division of responsibility, if you like, in how you approach the work?
We didn't. We didn't even have. I know Ani and Max will speak for that. They had their own issues, which were theirs to organise and manage. We didn't even do that. Everything, every story, every cover, every title for the magazine was discussed by all of us together. It was a drawn out process. We'd have 6-hour meetings.
I think that's as well. Sorry, I'll let you finish.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Oh, no, I was going to say, 'cause with us, I think a lot of people that wrote for us, it came across that we had these really, like, set divides, and that we'd sort of made decisions that, say, I would never have an opinion on creative, or, like, I was the least graphically minded person on our team, and so I probably let others take the lead in that place, but that doesn't mean that I never had an opinion or never contributed or was never consulted. Like, they weren't decisions that, like, were just like, oh, Sally won't have anything to do with that. Like, there were definitely some covers that I was like, hey, how about we try this, or, you know, I would prefer a particular headline or color or something like that. That was all, it was still very collaborative, just that I think the areas where we instigated change or tried something new, that definitely led into where we found our own strengths and interests. So, you know, the coolest graphic stuff that we did was definitely the other girls' ideas, but it doesn't mean that I just, you know, submitted some news pieces and then was like, I don't care how it looks. Like, we definitely still collaborated a lot on that.
Yeah. Well, our team,
sorry.
We had so many. No, you go.
Go.
I was going to say briefly, we did have a really formal process, and we had, because there were 10 of us, we worked like a different team each week. So someone was editor-in-chief. There was a couple of sub-editors who were meant to come in and proof the final copy, and there was a deputy editor-in-chief. And you had you had more roles to do some weeks, and you could put more of a personal touch onto the paper, but it was still pretty consultative, and that generally worked quite well. Although there were times when the editor-in-chief would kind of sneak something in the last minute, much to everyone's dismay when they read the actual paper.
Yeah, with us we had a different issue each. So we had 9 issues, and there was one double up for issue 5. And it was a great process because you'd sort of be able to take it and theme each issue. So the editor-in-chief for that one would choose the theme, and then we'd go from there, and sort of it would be really collaborative after that. But we also, for the editing process, we had different teams. So we had structural, copy, and proofing. So they were the 3 sort of editing teams that we'd have, and then we'd sort of swap around and say, like, oh, I like doing copy for these issues, but I want to try structural. So we'd all sort of get a different, like a go at doing the different ones, and sort of, yeah, that was really good. Yeah, so I think, like, we did have, like, a rigorous structure, and I think that was something that was really, I don't know, beneficial for everyone, because being organised is the only way we could have ever produced it. Yeah, so it was good being that organised. And I mean, like, we had Andy, one of our team members. She was just, like, constantly just the most organised person I've ever met in my life. She's amazing. So she was really good at sort of getting everyone in line with that sort of stuff. And I think because we stuck to the different rotations and we stuck to our roles, like, we all had different roles during the year. Like, so we'd have, like, I was the digital sort of editor, and I'd do most of the online stuff. And then there'd be someone liaising with the printer. There'd be people liaising with the essay, stuff like that. Those. So that was really good to have those like roles, so you'd know exactly what you were doing, and you wouldn't sort of get confused or tread on other people's feet or miss things, which would have been terrible. But yeah, so I think it worked out really well in the end by having those defined roles. Yeah.
So I think ultimately across the board, kind of working to your strengths, but also diversifying your knowledge base and your skill set as well, which I think is a really important thing to get out of a student editor experience. Once again, if you'd like to tweet us a question, you can do so via the DWF15 hashtag or News2015 hashtag. Florus2 has just tweeted, student politicians rustle my jimmies too, Max. Thanks, Flora.
When I look back at my time as an editor, my one regret was just like we should have just gone them all way harder. Like we should have just gone nuts. Like I always felt a bit bad for them and stuff, but in hindsight, like no, they're all like moving up the hierarchy now. They're all becoming influential. We should have screwed them over while we had the chance more.
More jimmies rustled. More jimmies rustled.
Exactly.
But it does kind of lead me into my next question, which is it's kind of an interesting thing, really, because student publications are relatively unique in that they are produced mostly within student unions, which themselves are political structures, and you do have that problem of having to navigate student politics and student politicians. So did you have any specific problems with student politics or student politicians? We'll go with the girls first.
Where our smiles a giveaway.
Where do we start?
Oh, gosh.
How many stories can you possibly tell us?
Lots.
Vertigo is very much entwined with, and the election process, at least when I was doing it, was very much entwined with student politics. We didn't, up until I think last year's team, your team, no one ever ran without the backing of a student political group. So,
yeah.
And then they are also then in charge of, they have to approve the publication. So the president of the student union has to approve the entire publication before it can go out, which meant that we very quickly, within the first edition, we'd gotten a fact wrong about the Student Association at UTS, and they threatened to fire us. And it was a minor fact, but it was our own fault. We shouldn't have gotten it wrong. And then from then on, it was that kind of because they had the power to do that. It was that kind of, you had to navigate being able to hold them accountable for things like spending all your money on a jumping castle, but at the same time keep them in your good books because they have the power to take away all of your funding. They are under no obligation to give it to us.
Yeah, I think with us, because there's that whole process of being it has to go through the Students' Association first. So you'd have a Director of Student Publications, the DSP. So you'd send it to them, and then they would approve everything that you'd print before it went to print. So it was often, I know in some cases you had to be quite diplomatic if you were criticising the essay because they directly give us our funding. So I think that didn't discourage us from critiquing them when it needed to happen, but
as long as it was factually accurate,
exactly, yeah, so it was okay. But I think things with funding, like we had a very interesting and difficult time trying to get more funding because it was it was just a nightmare.
Yeah.
And then this year's team has been their budget's been increased by 30 grand.
So it seemed a little partisan.
Yeah, that was a great thing to find out. I was like, okay, fantastic. That would have been nice last year, but I mean, whatever. We may do. No, I think for our budget, we made an amazing magazine, so it was beautiful. Incredibly proud of it. But it was very difficult to sometimes get tread the line between, trying to get what you want and trying to not piss people off too much.
Because I guess in terms of the politics of your year, it was very much a team, the team that was elected to the union was a background to the team that won the student media.
Yeah. So like we were endorsed by one one particular team and be like, okay, you know, the chances are you guys will probably win because you've won the last however many years. That didn't happen.
12 years.
Yeah, that didn't happen, and we somehow miraculously got we got elected
over the line.
despite not being backed by the winning Students Association team. So, I mean, that was great, but it did make it really difficult to try and deal with the essay at times. So, yeah.
And this is a really interesting question, because I know for a fact that you're all from very different kind of political backgrounds, if you like, in the way that you actually got into the job. So we might jump to Max next, because Max is kind of an interesting case because, shall we say, you've moved to New Matilda, which is in itself a very political, notoriously political web publication. So how did you approach this?
Well, just to the first discussion, for us, we had a similar situation whereby the president of the SRC was legally liable for what he published, not us. So we actually had quite a serious responsibility to try and avoid defamation or lawsuits or whatever to protect them. That said, they used that as a weapon against us to censor us. So it's like, oh, this article criticising all the other Labor factions is fine, but this bit that criticises my Labor faction that's the defamatory part. You're going to have to take that out. We had some really, really serious conflicts, and especially early in the year, we were quite badly censored. We had to basically pull stories because they were about student politicians who were close to the association, who we knew wouldn't sue the association or the SRC, but we had to unfortunately pull back from the stories, which was an interesting and I found really upsetting experience. But yeah, I mean, one thing I find interesting is that for me, moving from student media, we were like quite an openly lefty rat bag ticket at uni, and that was fine for me because I've gone and worked at New Matilda, so it kind of is a natural progression in a way. But I always wondered how other editors felt about disclosing their politics or talking about politics or writing about politics when, you know, if you get a job at the ABC and you're 24 and you've done even something a little bit out there, a little bit radical, you know, you can become the target for other media. You know, you can be person targeted, and it's kind of risky. So I'm kind of interested in what you guys, how you navigated going from student media where you're kind of expected to have a certain politics, and a certain politics is very allowed, to a media environment where you're probably expected to be more centrist and maybe a bit more bland.
Yeah, that's kind of hard because I guess going to Crikey, we are quite a cheeky and opinionated type of thing, and so going from Virago in 2013, where after the election, our front cover had a picture of Tony Abbott and it just said, "We're fucked." That has never worked for me so far, but, you know, like, I've still got many years of my career to go, so it could come back to bite me at some point. But, yeah, it hasn't been a problem. Like, my student politics hasn't, and general political stuff that I wrote for Virago hasn't been an issue, but I was wary of it at the time, and I definitely, I guess, limited myself to writing hard news and that kind of stuff, and staying away from, I never pitched an opinion column or any kind of analysis, I guess, as a personal, when I was writing, not so much when I was editing. When I was editing, I would commission all sorts of crazy stuff, but anything that I guess had my byline on it, I was quite conservative about. But when it came to editing, we were like, we wanted to put naked people on the cover and everything like that. And that was the only time our student union ever tried to influence what we published. And they didn't stop us publishing naked people. They just asked us to make the warning on the outside cover bigger, because it was a week after Oni Square's vagina edition that had been censored, and so they didn't want the same thing to happen, so they made us make our nudity warning in bigger font.
That probably leads us into our next question, which comes from Felicity Pickering. Thank you for watching, Felicity. Is there anything that you guys published that then had a backlash, or something that you regretted running with? Hannah, Hattie, first up.
Did we? No. Well, we did. We published a piece about cultural appropriation and dress, which got a fair amount of backlash from the UTS Business Society. Interestingly enough, because they had, I think it was like a Mexican fiesta party or something, and the person who wrote the article, Lime Russell, she mentioned in the article that that was what they were doing, and it was potentially, definitely, cultural appropriation. And they sort of emailed us and then started personally, I don't know, going to our Facebook accounts and finding photos and whatever, and it was just sort of, okay, this is like not really on. And they sort of took it to the UTS SA and the president and that sort of thing. It all got a little bit out of hand. But then eventually they sort of just backed down, because we asked them to write a response, and we were like, you know, like, please, President of the UTS Business Society, write a response, defend your position, and, you know, see how that goes. But they funnily enough, weren't interested in doing that eventually. And after we sort of asked them a few times, we decided to just let it go.
We had some things that had potential for backlash, I think, but they luckily didn't. We wrote a spread on how to get an abortion if you needed one and wanted one, and people weren't especially happy with that. We wrote a spread about the pro-life student group, Life Choice, which popped up around Sydney in 2012 to 2013, and ended up turning up in most student unis, I think, and we wrote about that, and that had potential. And we also, at one point, we were tracking a Chinese students organization, and it was an exploitative one for international students, which was it Master Chang? Something like that. Master and he actually threatened one of our editors, and we never wrote the story. And then we had Max and Oni report on that threat, which was good. It wasn't. I don't think we were too out there, but scary.
So Max, you had a few of your own. I'm sure.
So there's different levels of backlash, and the funny thing about writing for student media, you know, if we're all honest about it, is it's probably a pretty small group of regular readers, like a very small group, and they're the self-interest readers who go to the paper each week to check if their name's in it, and they love being outraged when it is there or when it isn't there. So like you get constant outrage from them, and we tried to provoke that, I think, to some degree, and that was fine. But then you're also you can spill over suddenly into a far greater pool of attention, and I think it's happening now more for student media as we're all finally getting our act together online and really doing breaking news and pushing stuff on social media. And you'll see, like even Oni and stuff, still quite regularly they'll start reporting on the story, which will then be followed up by the Herald, or they'll do a follow-up angle which will open the story more. And so suddenly you can write these stories which you're not expecting that many people to read, and they can go global, and it can have a huge backlash depending on how it was written. And often it's I know this was an issue down in Melbourne a few years ago. Often the person who writes it, it's worse when it's a contributor who's just a regular contributor, and they write maybe an op-ed or a story or something about a personal experience, and they're not really anticipating to have that much scrutiny, and suddenly it blows it up, and they're identified, and they've got big, national, international press outlets pushing against them. So for us, the obvious one was the Vagina Soir edition, which got censored by our SRC because of fear of legal repercussion, which of course then meant that the story went way bigger. There was also a printing error when we tried to print. It was meant to be blocked out, but the ink was a bit transparent, so it didn't actually work. But that wasn't really like there wasn't really a blowback against us. It was more actually a blowback against the SRC, and yeah, it was quite supportive. But that was something which we did, which we thought this might get a bit of attention, and it actually went around the world, and suddenly we were being looked at by a lot of people who didn't think to ever be looking at us.
I think the backlash we got wasn't really against us as editors, but we so the year that we edited Farrago was when Margaret Thatcher died, and our student union moved a motion. Our Students' Council celebrated that death, and they were the words were unreservedly celebrated. And I was at that meeting, and we put that story online, and we had been asked off the record not to publish the names of the people that had voted for it or abstained. And so, and we did, because we felt like, you know, if you're going to vote to unreservedly celebrate someone's death, no matter who it is or why you do it, then you need to be willing to put your name to it. And so there was quite a bit of backlash against the student union and those student councillors after that, because quite a few people disagreed with them, and it ended up on like Andrew Bolt's blog and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, their names were published on one of the, sadly, most read blogs in the country. And actually then Bolt misquoted us and misnamed some people. It was really annoying. But yeah, so there was quite a lot of backlash against that story, but not necessarily like our role in it, because we just put a straight news piece up, and then in the next edition, because we didn't have any photos of that students' council meeting, because we didn't actually think anything was going to happen. Like, I didn't think that motion was going to get up. We didn't have any like photos, and so we represented the students' councillors as fruit and vegetables and took photos of that. But yeah, the backlash was mainly against us.
Surely you're not accusing Andrew Bolt of not fact-checking there, Sally, are you?
Not at all. I know.
No.
Andrew Bolt is very keen on his facts completely.
Let's go to another question, and it comes from Steph Walker, who is tweeting to us through the DWF 15 hashtag. She asks, was anyone at the union helpful during your tenure? And I think I might expand this a bit, because as editors, you are essentially the top of the food chain when it comes to the publication. But as student editors, you're still quite inexperienced. So where did you turn when you needed assistance? Did you go to somebody within the union? Did you go to somebody within the industry? Let's go with Hannah and Harriet first.
You know who we... Steph Walker. She was... She ran the music conference when we did it in 2013
And 14.
So she spoke to us, and she was always happy to help us with that.
Yeah.
We have at UTS we have a students association which runs the paper, and we have a union which runs clubs and societies. So we did have our sources within the union, which was helpful for journalism, but also we pissed them off by publishing exactly where they spent all their SAF money, and they didn't particularly like that. Our SA liaison was quite friendly with the team that was in, because they were part of the same political group, and so he navigated all of that for us, and it was really great. The thing is that you need them, like you need them for information, or else you risk not reporting on the essay at all. And they also have to have reports in every edition, so talking to them about that all the time, and chasing them on that all the time.
Yes, constantly.
And changing their copy all the time because of grammar.
Or not.
It was good to have people in those organisations to talk to, and it was especially helpful to have Steph, who is an incredible lady.
Steph was such an enormous help, especially at the start of our tenure. We had a bit of a hard time sorting things out at the start due to SA. Let's go with that. And we emailed her and called her, and she was fantastic. She was so helpful during the news conference as well, and was super open and really, really great and knowledgeable as well. Like she knows so much. So new student editors talk to her because she's amazing. I can't emphasize that enough. And I think we also had people. We had an advertising manager, so we don't sort of organise our own advertising. There's someone in the Students Association that does that and gets paid to do that. But she was often, I don't know, at times it was difficult to try and find the balance on how to sort of deal with that and make sure that there was the right things going in the magazine. And yeah.
You also need your past editors.
Yeah, you do.
We tried to help her. And we had a team a few years before us who were happy to have a chat to us. We went to the pub.
Yeah.
We got them to give us everything. And the advertising manager was also a former Vertigo editor who helped us out of it.
Yeah.
So did you two have a lot of crossover during your Hattie, you were 2014, Hannah, you were 2013. Did you have a lot of crossover during the course of the year, or was it mainly kind of a transitional phase, or?
It was entirely their team, but we did a handover, which we tried to make as intensive as possible, and then they started to invite us to their parties.
Yeah.
So we came to all of them.
Yeah. We hang out a lot. Can you tell? No, it was, so Hannah's team, they sort of, I knew one of their team members, Joe, from just social stuff. We're friends before that, and then so he sort of got me interested in the role to start off with, and then we had the big handover after we'd been elected, and so that was super intensive but super, super great. And we did the same for this year's team, which was good too, because like we diversified our roles and we had very defined roles that different people came in and sort of workshopped with them the different roles that we had, like whether they applied or not. I mean, that's their choice and that's great. But so that's what we did.
Because we had a Facebook group where they could ask us questions if they needed anything from us, talking about our social outings.
Yeah.
I mean, at first it was about
work,
copy, and how to deal with contributors. So, yeah.
Good stuff. We'll go to Max now. Max, did you have anyone special in your life?
Just the editors. There's only the editors in your life. There's no one else. No, so we had in our association also a split position where two people would work as publication managers and they'd liaise with the printers and do train us up at the beginning of the year in InDesign and Photoshop and everything. So that was really great. Past editors, we had a really good handover. There's often quite a fraught relationship between different years because normally the way you campaign is by slagging off the people who edited the year before you, but we had a good relationship with them, so they were really good. It's just like really basic mundane tips like have your meetings on a Tuesday morning because you're less tired. Like that was a really good idea which they gave to us and stuff like that. I think when you have a big ticket as well, like you support each other a lot. But I really liked also meeting all the other student eds at the beginning of the year at the conference and hearing how the publications worked and using that to think about how we wanted to do things and seeing the similarities in the problems that a lot of us were having.
Yeah, that was great.
It's cool because then you all meet up at NYWF in
like November.
Like, oh, I'm Vicky.
Yeah, no, it's super great. Have a chat, see how the year went. Compare, I don't know, battle stories and scars.
Battle scars.
Yeah.
Sally, did you have anyone that you kind of turned to in times of trouble?
We had our former editors. We were from the same, factional group as the editors before us, and now the same group that's been running Farrago for 10 years. So, and one of our former editors was a continued student, and so we were able to like call him and be like, hey, can you come by the office? InDesign is doing something crazy, especially with like technical stuff like that. They were really good. And we also had in the union, there's a staff member, Goldie, who everyone who's been involved in UMSU would know about, and she would be the one to be like, where can we find this? And we got lost somewhere in Union House, or something to do with that. And she was really good for, I guess, the practical way the union ran. And sometimes I'd be like, I've noticed that this particular, I just chat about what was going on in the union with her, and she's not a elected representative, so we'd have great chats about everything without me having to worry that she was going to block my funding. Just generally, like, ex-student editors, and from, like, a couple of years ahead of us was sometimes good to, I guess they would have distance and have good advice. They were the really helpful ones, but yeah, past editors were the best, and our printer was amazing. He has, like, printed Farrago for, like, 8 years, and so we could like call him sometimes and ask if it was possible to print something like this, or if it was possible to do. We did a sealed section for our election edition, so when we're like, hey, can we do a sealed section? How cheaply can we do it? That kind of thing. Like, our printer was an absolute angel.
Great.
Thank you, Steph Walker, for the entirely self-serving question. And Sally, I can confirm that Goldie is still absolute gold. She's been helping me through my work this year. So she's been fantastic. But ultimately, it's all about the people around you. And I think the lesson here is that no matter where you are or where you are within the union, that there will always be somebody out there that you can actually latch onto and reach out for assistance. If you're just joining us, you're watching the this is the first half of the News Digital Student Editor Conference. This event's entitled "Looking Back, Looking Forward," and I think it's probably time that we actually moved on and started looking forward, if you like, because we are going to run short on time. So I think one of the most interesting things about this panel is that all four of you now are working with organisations that all operate online, which is really interesting and not by design whatsoever. So I suppose that kind of raises the long-running question of, the death of print that we hear about and we've been hearing about for years. But student publication is very different, of course, because of the way that they receive their funding. Where do you guys think the future of student publications might lie? Anyone want to start us off?
I think it's in, I guess, diversifying, as in your magazine and your newspaper is only the start of what you do. So we tried to do video content, which was an absolute, it was so much fun and it was really good to put it out there, but my goodness, video takes so much work. And even now I have to, we do video content at Cracky, and it still takes so much work because it's so different from writing some words on a page, editing them, and either putting them online or putting them on a page. But, it means that, I guess, and especially for us, our technical title wasn't editor, it was media officer. So that covers everything. So we had the magazine, we had social media, we had our website, and our website we were trying to get upgraded and it was horrible, and we were told we were going to have a new website for our first edition, and we never got it. And so it just means that your magazine is only the start, and we also were really working at starting student radio. So we had podcasts, and now obviously, Bren, you're about to actually launch the project that I went to so many meetings for and tried to make happen. So that warms my heart. But I think it really, we're lucky because we're not, I guess, motivated by profit in the actual print sense. But it means that we use print, we use that medium really specifically, and it's only the start of what your, I guess, masthead does.
Max, any thoughts?
Yeah, it's obviously online. I guess in terms of diversifying the type of storytelling you're doing, it is, there's only so much time you have. There's only so many resources you get. You're not all getting paid a living wage or anything to, be in the office for 60 hours a week making great quality video. So that's probably how much time you spend there anyway, though. But I think the best thing is that online has two really, really big benefits for student media, which is the first is that you can break news. You don't have to wait, especially for you guys who have less regular publications. You can break news, and not only can you break it, then you can tweet it, and then all the Herald journos or Age journos who follow you go, hang on, that's actually quite a good, that's a story that goes beyond an important local little news story for students. That's the story, and you can actually start to influence news agendas. You can get stuff out there. You can give yourselves a lot more power because the university knows that if you're writing stories, they can influence the news agenda generally, and therefore they have to engage with you more. They have to be a bit more open with you, and that's great pressure to put on them. Yeah, I was thinking about this before. I think from the last maybe 3 or 4 years of on, I can only think of one person who's now a cadet at the Herald, and they're doing mostly online stuff anyway. So in terms of building your skills as an editor and as a future someone who's looking for a job, it's definitely useful writing online and playing around with what works online and what doesn't, and how you play with those those old formulas. So yeah, I think that, but online's been great for student journalism, and I think it gives it a whole new element, which is it's great to see. And I see Farrago stories come up, and I see stories from UTS come up organically just through my newsfeed or through Twitter and stuff when I read them. It's great.
Yeah, well, especially with Twitter. I mean, 2013 was a year of I guess drama for UTS to face and tell you. I think we started it with the crane falling, halfway through, half of the Haymarket campus flooded.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the year, there was a bomb.
Yeah.
So we were on Twitter for all of those when we were on campus and trying our best to cover it.
Yeah.
I think I was actually live tweeting the bomb scare from my office now because nobody was on campus. But getting my tips from my friends who were at uni. But I think the future of it is in Twitter, although I don't think print will die because the main way people consume student media is still the print edition. People still, most of the time people are reading these feature articles is when they're waiting for class and they're bored and they see it on like right next to their lecture theatre. It's not, I'm not sure we have as much of a social media following as we would like to have. Obviously it's expanding every year and it's very exciting, but for now a lot of it is still based on us and people picking up the paper because there's not really that much else to do, or because they're having their lunch, or because they're tired of studying, or whatever reason.
You mean for our year, we put like a goal of having more followers on Twitter and Facebook and expanding the website. Like we redid the website, and then we did it again to add more things to it, which was really, really great. And more people were reading things online and more people were interacting with us online, which was really great. And something personally, because I was the digital person, I was very happy to see, which was really great. And then I think like it's all about, I don't know, increasing accessibility and readability and stuff like that. And I think if you use online in a really effective manner, you can get that. And that's really good.
Because the reality of it is still that people last an average of like a minute or so on your page, and that's good.
Yeah.
Like
that's good retention.
There was a bit of. It would be really great if we had the time and the resources to make lots of video content and audio content. But the good thing about UTS is that you have 2 SER for audio content, and you have other journalism-based newspapers coming out of it, or web-only ones as well. And we weren't paid at all. We got nothing.
Nada. But I think this year's team is doing some video content and stuff like that, which will be really interesting to see how they do that and how they go about balancing that with the newspaper they're doing and the quarterly magazine, because they've sort of shuffled up the way the magazine comes out now, which is going to be really interesting to see happen. So yeah, I think it'd be cool to see their video content.
I'm going to pull another question from Twitter now. This one comes from Eliza Jane Berkledge. And she asks, thank you for joining us, Eliza. She asks, what do you think of the growth of paid student media writing like Hijacked? How does this coexist with student magazines that don't pay?
I think with us it was quite difficult because that came in sort of at the start of the year. And I remember at news, I think it was Brody Comedy, sort of said something about not supporting it in a way because it essentially takes writers and pays them, which is an amazing thing. And like, I am all for paid writing. I don't actually know how much it is per article, but it's really like it's difficult to compete with because obviously as a writer you want to be paid and you want to get, I don't know, you want to feel like your work is valued, and it's often difficult to do that with student media because there's not that monetary incentive. But I mean,
the point of the student media is that it's your first byline.
Exactly.
Like it's that you're learning how to do it. It's a training ground for you to be a writer. It's not about you being a. It's not about it being perfect.
No.
And so I think I'm not sure if every new writer is ready to be in that form straight away.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know if it's. Is it even a good publication? Like, I've never seen it.
Yeah, I'm not really suspicious of it. Like, when it came out, it was sort of, like, I've never actually been to the website. I've seen them shared, and I think I've read 1 or 2 things, and I know people are writing for it. And I think at the start they weren't offering money, or they were offering vouchers or something like that, and so we were sort of, and they were, like, asking if they could use our copy. like republish
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And you're like, no, like you're not going to make profit out of us. And you know, it's great that you know young writers can get paid, and I think it's like $80 or $100 or something like that, and that's great. But I don't know if they, you know, we gave every single writer and every single item that came through to us huge amounts of feedback and really like placed a lot of emphasis on helping people improve at what they do. So, you know, Hijacked might pay people, but they wouldn't get back, you know, 300 to 400 words in feedback and like support or, you know, that on-campus community. So you might get that money, but you're not going to say, hey, these are my best friends when I'm like 30 or 40. Yeah, I met them at Hijacked. Like that's not gonna happen.
Yeah. So we obviously all of us were editing was the year Hijack came up on the scene, and it pitched itself initially as being some kind of broad, like overarching national publication for student media. Hey guys, we're one of the game. You know, like we get it. It's like, where do you have all this money from? Like, where did that come from? That's funny. We just enjoyed mercilessly ripping on them because we were so angry that they were doing that. I think from what I know, they're paying students now, which is great, and that's fine. But I mean, writing for Hijacked is good. You should send, you know, if you're a student, you should send copy and try and get money out of them, and you know, get bylines and get feedback and whatever. But it's never going to do the same thing as any student publication, which is, you sit down with your writers and you say, okay, we don't have any resources and we're working really hard for really no financial reward ourselves, but we do it because we think there's something more about student media, there's something that's actually important, and we think there's a job to be done here that no one else will do if we don't do it, and we want you to do it with us. And, you know, if you're doing a good job of editing, you know, as was discussed, you should be giving feedback and working with those writers, helping them improve, and, you know, sometimes bringing them in on really exciting and big things. And, you know, Hijacked, I don't really care, but it's just like a, you know, they're out there to make money. That's why it exists. It's there to make money. And I think you can tell it's one of those publications where they went, how do we make money? And then following from that, what's our agenda? Not what's our agenda, and then how do we support that by making money, which is, I think, how people who are actually interested in media think.
I think it's also important to note that it's not an either-or thing. Like, you can write for this publication and Hijacked. If you've got time to do all of that writing, I am amazed at you. But yeah, you can definitely do both. Like, you know, write for your student publications, write for Hijacked. I guess they're different types of cultures, and it's not an either-or thing. Like, Farrago's in its 90th year this year, so you know, you get to be part of that cool club and say, hey, I'm writing for the student publication that's been around for a very long time. And Hijacked, you also get to be like, I'm writing for this thing that's brand new and also has its merits.
I think we've got time for one last question before we have to wrap things up here. I just want to pose to each of you, what would your advice be to current editors when it comes to positioning yourself for a career or another position after their job, after the end of this year?
Intern?
Yeah.
Yeah?
You just have to intern.
Intern?
Yeah, apply for as many internships as possible. Like, just, even if you don't think you'll get it, just go and apply, because the skills you gain as a student editor are so valuable, and people look for that, like, especially people in the media industry. Like, it's crazy because, you know, you don't think you'll get these things, but, like, you apply and you sort of show them some of your work, and it's, and you can get some amazing things, and you can really, I don't know, harness amazing opportunities. Also, another tip I would say is, I don't know, keep talking to other student publications, foster relationships with them, because it's really fun, and it's also a great way to sort of keep in contact and see what other people are doing.
Well, we're our own little network.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I don't know, at certain events that you'll get to go to throughout the year, like news, you'll be able to make professional contacts and, I don't know, be able to harness opportunities that way, which is great. And you'll also sort of start to get to know everyone in the media and different people, different personalities, and, I don't know, different things people are doing, which is really great. And you can sort of start seeing maybe what you want to do by looking at what other people are doing.
And you've got to freelance. You've got to do things like Hijacked. I think there was a weird advertising thing that was going around in 2013 where you would write copy for blogs, like people's like these blogs, like a big fitness empire wanted blogs, and you write that copy about like fitness tips, and it's not about it being like this great kind of portfolio filler. It's about learning how to write. And actually writing copy is the only way you can learn how to write.
Exactly.
And then I guess a lot of it's about applying for things that are beyond your means.
Yeah.
I applied to be the assistant editor at the Music at the beginning of last year before I'd started student media, and I almost got it. And then 6 months later, the position was open again, and then I did.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be fully qualified. You don't have to be like you're kind of that guy who does everything, but you do need to intern.
Yeah.
You need to
Get experience.
Max?
Yeah. I was going to say, like, I mean, we're all trying to figure this out because the industry's so shaken up. There's not, like, that path that was there doesn't exist, and there's still paths, it's hard to find them. You just have to be a bit crazy brave, and definitely agree with what the girl said, just apply for everything, way to be ahead. Those are the people who I'm seeing now getting rewarded, the people who've done that. But I think the most important thing is actually while you're at uni, you have so much freedom. It's not going to happen again to write in styles you want to write, to produce the kind of stuff you want to produce, to take angles that you want to take, and to look at issues that other people won't look at. So I think just throw yourself into it and figure out what you like doing. Because I had a whole year of like writing news stories and getting to do some features and figuring out how to do interviews well. And through that process, I was like, oh, you know what? I don't enjoy the editorial side so much. I like this. I like writing this form. And I also made me realize where my skills were and where I was lacking. And so there's obviously the technical kind of side of it. You need to network with everyone you can and be as outgoing as you can and try and be as confident as you can. But also, like, the most important thing is figure out where you actually want to be. Try and get as specific an idea about what kind of stuff you want to be doing, and then develop those skills throughout the year and just enjoy it. And then you'll know better by the end of the year where there might be jobs to look for.
And finally, Sally.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that has been said. Like, apply for everything you can, intern where you can, get involved with both student magazines and opportunities on campus and off campus. Like, I was really involved and still am with the Student Youth Network, which is the student radio station in Melbourne. And also, this is also sort of live in the moment. Like, don't think of your, I guess, student media experience as an experience within itself and not necessarily a stepping stone into something else. Like, I definitely came across some people who sort of treated parties and things like that as like, you know, I must make 3 professional contacts tonight, and were like really quite, and it scared me when people would be like, oh, so, you know, oh, you freelance for Cracky, well, you know, I definitely want to be friends with you because, you know, you're going to be like useful to me later on. Like, just make friends, because that's what your contacts are later on. Like, the people that I get stories from and the people that, you know, I suggest for freelance opportunities and things like that, they're my friends. They're not the people that sort of, you know, interrogated me about all of my professional abilities and connections and things like that. So that sort of stuff happens organically, and if you force it, then it doesn't happen, because you feel like that, you know, it gets weird. So, you know, treat the year as an experience in itself and not necessarily as a stepping stone for something else, because then you'll miss out on all the fun stuff and you won't take risks. Like, you know, if I had have always been worried about, you know, what was going to happen in the future, and, you know, if when I'm old, if someone's going to go looking through, you know, old Farragos and look at the dumb things I said or the jokes I made or, you know, whatever weirdo pictures we published, then I wouldn't have done it. And I'm so glad we did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really hope no one ever does that.
I think I hope they do. Like, we put some hilarious things in there.
My first piece was how to have sex at uni. Like, I don't particularly want.
That's important news.
Very
because
important
later on, when they
information.
become actual politicians, your future editors will love you, because then they'll go through like old editions and be like, oh look, here's the education minister with all their hair, and you know, that kind of stuff. So publish as many photos of student politicians as you can, because your future editors will be so happy. And hopefully you'll get like a Christopher Pine on D talking about like how he like wants to keep education free or something like that.
think to wrap this all up, I did actually speak with another former editor of Uniswar and another former editor of Farrago, and they both said that ultimately just enjoy enjoy the ride. That was basically their response in a sentence, and I think that's something that everybody who is editing right now and maybe editing in the future should remember. So I think we'll wrap it up there. To Hattie O'Donnell, Hannah Story, Max Chalmers, and Sally White, thank you so much for your time. I pretty much owe you a digital beverage at some point. And for those watching at home, join us in about 15 minutes for our second half of this media experience. Which is our Student Media Roundtable. We're a panel of current student editors will be joining me to talk shop and, in some cases, give us a little sneak preview into their freshly pressed first editions. So I will see you then.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Bren, for a wonderful panel. It was very informative. I made notes. Sally, Max, Hattie, and Hannah, thank you so much to you guys as well. Thank you everyone as well who was tweeting along on the DWF15 hashtag. Sorry we didn't get to all of your questions, but yeah, thank you Eliza, Claire, Em, Felicity, and Steph, and Flora, who was even sweet enough to spend her work break watching half an hour of the event, which was really sweet. And Express Media, and Wordly, and Deacon Writers as well. So the event's recorded, so feel free to watch everything back, and stay tuned for the next event, which starts in 15 minutes. Okay, thank you so much, guys. Bye. Bye.